wrestlers banging fists. Yes, you'd be banging fists too, haha. That is, if you found yourself lined up in a glass case because of your uniqueness with all sorts of other unique characters, or quote-unquote unique. That is, of course, according to the limited understanding of the British Museum, who sought to crowd the wrestlers' wrists, as the statue is called in true documentation, sought to crowd the wrestlers' wrists in with a lot of sillier statues, paraphernalias about dancing dogs and circus crowds and armless men and dragons, albeit armless men with their arms broken off likely enough by the British Museum, some rank-and-file member anyway breaking off the arms in frustration of losing his only chance of a girlfriend over the old text phone. Anyhow, slotted in with the circus, even though they would have belonged to some ancient Chinese games or version thereof, the Olympics of the Olympics the thoughtless Greeks were currently holding. The wrestlers are matching wrists to each other to find a simple thing: to abide by the rules of the day, that neither be taller than the other, and one can see even through the glare of the poorly shined glass casing that in this case one wrestler was taller, and therefore the pair would not have been able to wrestle. Purple Cow, panning away from the object placard, noting that someone at the museum just plain broke something and has to now fix it, we find, oh dear, this documentarian loves this piece, this purple and gold cow. It's the ideal example of the British Museum's failure at having a sense of humor. Effectually, some sweet-haired peasant somewhere in the Chinese mountains decided to design a friendly face of a cow, or a water buffalo as they're known in China, and it turned out very gleeful, as one can see. Why, the mirth is evident on the sweet animal's face. It is saying to itself in its mind, if it had a mind and weren't a sculpture, but in its imaginary mind, it is saying some witty Chinese proverb that cuts like a knife, as well as being jaunty and true, and nothing needs to change, except there's where the British Museum steps in and begins painting in gaudy colors, purple and gold, not such a hideous color that this American documentarian hasn't seen it since this American documentarian avoided getting a letterman's jacket at his first high school. As though to make it more gaudy, the British Museum has made it awful, gauche, loud, actually bragging, if a piece of art can brag. This documentarian therefore loves this piece enough because of the jarring difference between what it actually is and actually looks like. Causes this documentarian the sort of easy melancholy one only finds in the early AM hours under the spell of some strong drink. Everyone looking at each other with their funny eyes. All this talk of the case. This glass case is laid out strangely flat on the floor in the middle of the British Museum, in between some of the other artworks we've just seen, and right out where people trip over it all the time and fall through the glass and cut themselves. I almost tripped over it myself, but in time I looked down and saw what the gag of the British Museum was. Again, their different sense of humor, which is almost closer to the Elizabethan sense of humor rather than the modern sense, so associative with nature and things being interrelated, or maybe because the flatness of all these objects, the British Museum assumed they were representations of things dead in roads. And granted, the Romans built roads like no other early nation. Their artwork would not have been representative of roadkill by any stretch of the imagination, since no vehicle designed by the Romans had any more than a single or double horsepower, and would have been heard coming a league away by whatever creature in the road. And if that is the British Museum assessment, even worse then is their belief in magical creatures, and that, for example, you can find a young dragon crushed flat in the road. A bronze fitting of a man holding an eagle, a tiger, and an owl? No, it's a peasant cup, labeled by a drunk, a British Museum booze hound. The captured head of the Botta Vista. Our favorite known story of the Botta Vista is when he met the unbeliever in the woods, and the unbeliever said he did not believe, and the Botta Vista showed several tricks, and the unbeliever still did not believe. And then the Botta Vista suddenly turned into a beast with 1,000 eyes and freaked the unbeliever out. But of course, in the long run, that was just a story, so the unbeliever, if he hadn't been a fictional character himself, would have been right not to believe. The pipe loomed over by the teapot like a woman tied to railroad tracks in the Old West. Forever now you shall be haunted by this sight, which is exactly how the British Museum would like it to be. You certainly won't see any white men's costumes standing about as though occupied by some invisible demon, but here you see a Native American's ice hunting outfit, mare ice hunting outfit, standing erect as though occupied by a ghost form from some deeply oblivion-esque otherworldly darkness. This is exactly the reaction the British Museum wants. If you go about life now forever thinking about this costume when you are alone in the darkest alleys, or walking through or past a graveyard or whatever else, you shall be well unmanned for the day you visit the frozen north and meet an Eskimo.